Everyone in the neighborhood knew Harold as the patient old watchmaker. 76 years old, magnifying glass permanently attached to his eye, working on timepieces that most repairmen wouldn't touch. But when a terrorist device threatened to level City Hall, the humble craftsman transformed into someone the bomb squad never expected, revealing 30 years of experience with explosives that made clocks seem simple. Harold Eugene Pemberton was 76 years old, with white hair that perpetually needed trimming and gentle brown eyes magnified by thick glasses that made him appear scholarly and harmless. His arthritic hands moved with surprising precision when working on delicate mechanisms, and his voice carried the soft cadence of someone who had spent decades explaining complex procedures to people whose lives depended on understanding every detail. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we continue this incredible tale of hidden expertise and life-saving precision, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories about quiet masters deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Pemberton's timepiece repair occupied a narrow storefront on Chicago's North Side, squeezed between a vintage bookstore and a coffee shop that had been serving the same neighborhood for 30 years. The workshop was exactly what you'd expect from a master craftsman. Wooden workbenches worn smooth by decades of use, glass cases displaying antique pocket watches and mechanical clocks, and tools so specialized that most people wouldn't recognize their purposes. Harold had operated the shop for 12 years, ever since his retirement from what neighbors assumed was a career in mechanical engineering or precision manufacturing. He specialized in repairs that other watchmakers wouldn't attempt: 100-year-old grandfather clocks with movements the size of dinner plates, Swiss chronometers with complications that required weeks to properly calibrate, and pocket watches so intricate that their internal mechanisms resembled miniature cities of gears, springs, and jeweled bearings. The neighborhood treated Harold with the affectionate respect reserved for elderly craftsmen who preserved skills the modern world was abandoning. Customers would bring him timepieces that had been family heirlooms for generations, trusting him to restore mechanisms that connected them to ancestors who had valued precision, durability, and the artistry of mechanical engineering. "Mr. Pemberton, can you fix my grandfather's railroad watch? It hasn't run in 40 years. "Let me take a look, young man. These old movements just need someone who understands how they think." Harold's approach to repair work was methodical and unhurried. He would disassemble each timepiece completely, clean every component with solvents and specialized tools, replace worn parts with materials he machined himself, then reassemble everything with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The process could take weeks for complex pieces, but the results were timepieces that would run accurately for another century. What customers didn't realize was that Harold's patience, precision, and understanding of mechanical systems had been developed during a career that had nothing to do with measuring time. Harold lived alone in a modest bungalow 6 blocks from his shop, a tidy 2-bedroom house that reflected the organized mindset of someone who had spent decades managing details where mistakes could kill people. The living spaces were comfortable but spare, decorated with photographs of landscapes rather than people, furnished with practical pieces that prioritized function over style. But the basement workshop told a different story entirely. The space was equipped with precision tools that far exceeded anything required for clock repair: digital micrometers accurate to millionths of an inch, electronic testing equipment for measuring voltage and resistance, and reference manuals for mechanical systems that had nothing to do with timekeeping. A locked cabinet contained materials and components that would have raised serious questions if anyone had examined them closely. And in a fireproof safe hidden behind shelves of clock parts were documents from another life. Federal credentials that retained certain authorities even in retirement. Technical certifications for handling materials most people hoped never to encounter, and photographs of younger men in protective gear who had trusted Harold Pemberton with their lives during operations that balanced on the edge between success and catastrophic failure. Senior Technician Harold Eugene Pemberton, Chicago Police Department Bomb Squad. 31 years defusing explosive devices, training other technicians in procedures that kept cities safe, and developing protocols for handling threats that evolved as quickly as the minds that created them. His specialty had been improvised explosive devices, bombs built by terrorists, criminals, and unstable individuals who combined common materials into weapons designed to kill indiscriminately. Unlike military ordnance, which followed predictable engineering principles, IEDs required technicians who could think like the bomb makers, understanding twisted logic and improvised solutions that turned household items into instruments of mass destruction. Harold's career had begun in 1977 when domestic terrorism was emerging as a threat to American cities and police departments were scrambling to develop expertise in areas they'd never needed before. He'd learned his craft from military instructors who had dealt with similar problems in Vietnam, adapting battlefield techniques for urban environments where civilians lived and worked around potential targets. Over 3 decades, he'd defused hundreds of explosive devices. Car bombs targeting police stations, pipe bombs mailed to judges, sophisticated devices planted by international terrorists who had studied American infrastructure vulnerabilities. Each call required perfect concentration, absolute precision, and the kind of steady nerves that allowed someone to work calmly while knowing that one single mistake could kill dozens of people. The work had taught Harold to see mechanical systems as puzzles that revealed their creators' intentions through design choices, component selection, and assembly techniques. Every bomb maker had signatures, preferred materials, characteristic wiring patterns, and timing mechanisms that reflected their technical background and psychological profile. Retirement in 2008 was mandatory rather than voluntary. Police regulations required bomb technicians to retire at 55 to maintain the physical and mental standards necessary for work where age-related changes in vision, hearing, or reaction time could be fatal. Harold was proud of his service, satisfied with his pension, and completely unprepared for civilian life that lacked the intensity and purpose that had defined his adult existence. The clock repair shop wasn't about money. His police pension provided comfortable retirement income. It was about working with his hands on mechanical systems that required the same attention to detail, the same understanding of how components interacted, and the same satisfaction that came from making broken things work properly again. The transition from explosive devices to timepieces was more natural than most people would realize. Both required understanding mechanical systems at the most fundamental level, recognizing how designers had intended components to interact, and developing the patience to work methodically through complex problems without rushing towards solutions that might create bigger problems. Thursday, November 16th, started like every other morning. Harold arrived at his shop at 8 a.m., unlocked the front door, and began his daily routine of checking ongoing repair projects, organizing tools, and preparing workspace for the intricate work that filled his retirement years. He was adjusting the escapement mechanism in a 1920s Patek Philippe pocket watch when Chicago police detective Maria Santos walked through his front door at 10:47 a.m. Harold recognized law enforcement presence immediately. Something about the way officers moved, scanned environments, and positioned themselves near exits never changed, regardless of rank or assignment. Detective Santos was trying to appear casual, but her body language indicated official business that couldn't wait for normal appointment scheduling.
Of course, Detective. How can I help you?
Sir, we understand you used to work in law enforcement, bomb squad specifically.
Harold nodded once. His service record wasn't classified, though few people in his current neighborhood knew about his previous career. Yes, ma'am. 31 years, Chicago PD Bomb Disposal Unit. Retired in 2008. Detective Santos moved closer to the workbench, her voice dropping to the level used for sensitive information. Mr. Pemberton, we have a situation downtown. Federal Building, City Hall area. Someone's planted a device that our current bomb squad can't figure out. It's unusual, sophisticated, the kind of thing that might require someone with your level of experience. Harold's hands stilled on the pocket watch he'd been adjusting. Every instinct developed over 30 decades of bomb disposal activated simultaneously. What kind of device, Detective?
IED with a timing mechanism that our techs can't identify. It's counting down, but the display system is unlike anything they've seen before. Mechanical components integrated with digital electronics, all housed in a case that's too complex to X-ray properly. Harold had encountered similar devices during the later years of his career, when bomb makers began combining traditional mechanical timers with modern electronics to create weapons that were harder to understand and more difficult to disable safely. How much time remaining on the countdown? 4 hours, 18 minutes. But here's the problem. Our bomb robot can't get close enough for proper examination because the device appears to have motion sensors that might trigger premature detonation. We need someone who can approach it manually and make assessments that our equipment can't provide. Harold looked around his peaceful clock repair shop, at the timepieces that measured hours and minutes without threatening anyone's life, at the retirement work that had kept his hands steady and his mind occupied for 12 years. But Chicago Police Department was asking for his help, and there were people in the federal building whose lives depended on skills that Harold had spent 31 years perfecting. Senior Technician Pemberton made his decision in approximately 15 seconds. Detective, I'll need to examine my old equipment to make sure it's still functional. Then I'll need transportation to the scene and briefings on current protocols. It's been 12 years since I've worked a live device. Harold closed his shop, hung a sign indicating emergency closure, and walked to his basement workshop to retrieve equipment he'd hoped never to need again. Bomb suit components, detection instruments, and tools designed for the most dangerous work a human being could perform. 25 minutes later, he was riding in an unmarked police car toward downtown Chicago, reading briefing materials about a threat that combined everything he'd learned about explosive devices with technologies that had evolved during his retirement. The scene at Federal Plaza was controlled chaos, managed with professional competence that Harold recognized immediately. Evacuation perimeters established at safe distances, emergency response teams positioned for various contingencies, and command post operations that coordinated resources from multiple agencies. But at the center of all this activity was a device that had stumped an entire generation of bomb disposal experts in the Chicago metropolitan area. Harold examined photographs and X-ray images that confirmed Detective Santos's description. The device was sophisticated beyond anything he had encountered during his active career, combining mechanical timing components that appeared to be adapted from precision clockwork with electronic systems that suggested advanced technical knowledge. "Mr. Pemberton, can you defuse it?" asked Commander Williams, current head of the Chicago Police Bomb Squad. Harold studied the images for several more minutes, his experienced eyes identifying components, wiring patterns, and assembly techniques that revealed important information about the device's creator and intended function. "Command, this is not just a bomb. It's a demonstration of technical expertise designed to challenge everything we know about explosive device disposal. The mechanical components are adapted from Swiss chronometer movements, the same kinds of mechanisms I work with in my clock shop. But they've been modified to control electronic systems that I'll need to understand before attempting any intervention." Harold began suiting up in protective gear that felt familiar despite 12 years of retirement. The bomb suit was heavier than he remembered. The helmet's face shield reduced his vision more than seemed optimal, and the thick gloves made fine motor control challenging for hands that had grown accustomed to delicate clockwork rather than life-or-death technical operations. But muscle memory from 30 decades of similar situations guided him through equipment checks, communication protocols, and mental preparation techniques that had kept him alive through hundreds of dangerous encounters. At 2:30 p.m., Senior Technician Harold Pemberton approached the explosive device that had stumped an entire generation of bomb disposal experts. What he found was exactly what his preliminary analysis had suggested: a masterpiece of mechanical engineering that combined traditional clockwork precision with modern electronics to create a weapon that required understanding both worlds to disable safely. The timing mechanism was based on a Swiss lever escapement, modified to trigger electronic components at precise intervals. The creator had used materials and techniques that suggested formal training in both horology and explosives, creating a device that would be incomprehensible to technicians who understood only one of those disciplines. But Harold Pemberton had spent 31 years learning to think like bomb makers, and 12 years working with exactly the kinds of precision mechanical systems that this device employed. Command, this is Pemberton. I'm beginning diagnostic procedures. The device appears to be designed by someone with extensive knowledge of both explosive ordnance and precision timekeeping. I'll need approximately 20 minutes for full assessment. Harold's examination revealed that the device was even more sophisticated than initial observations had suggested. The mechanical timing components were integrated with motion sensors, tamper detection systems, and backup triggers that would activate if primary systems were disabled improperly. But the creator made one crucial error. The mechanical components revealed design signatures that Harold recognized from his clock repair work. Specific techniques for adjusting escapement mechanisms, particular approaches to gear train assembly, and modifications that reflected formal training in Swiss chronometer construction. Harold knew exactly how this mechanism had been built, which meant he understood how to disable it safely. Command, beginning disarmament procedures. The timing mechanism can be stopped by interrupting the mechanical escapement system at a specific point in its cycle. I'll need absolute silence during the next 15 minutes. What followed was the most delicate work Harold had performed in over a decade. Using tools adapted from his clock repair shop, he disassembled components that had been designed to resist tampering, disabled backup systems that would have triggered alternate detonation methods, and finally stopped the timing mechanism that had been counting down toward catastrophic failure. At 3:47 p.m., the device was rendered completely safe. Command, this is Pemberton. Device is neutralized, all timing mechanisms disabled, electronic components safeguarded. Scene is secure. The story made local news but didn't include details that would compromise operational security or reveal techniques that future bomb makers might exploit. Retired bomb expert helps defuse downtown threat was the extent of public information about an incident that could have killed hundreds of people. Harold returned to his clock repair shop the next morning, hung up his open sign, and resumed work on the Patek Philippe pocket watch he'd been repairing when Detective Santos had arrived to change his retirement plans. But something had shifted in his approach to the work. The same precision that once saved lives by defusing explosive devices now brought timepieces back to life with a renewed sense of purpose. Every spring he tensioned, every gear he aligned, and every mechanism he restored was a reminder that the most important work often involved understanding how things were supposed to work and having the patience to make them work properly. Commander Williams visited Harold's shop the following week, carrying a pocket watch that belonged to his grandfather. Mr. Pemberton, I wanted to thank you personally for yesterday, and I was wondering if you might be interested in consulting work with the department, teaching younger techs some of the things they don't learn in modern training programs. Harold looked up from his workbench, his magnifying glass still positioned over the delicate mechanism he was adjusting. Commander, I'd be honored to help train the next generation, but I hope they never have to deal with devices as sophisticated as what we saw yesterday. Harold continued operating his clock repair shop until he was 83, when arthritis finally made precision work impossible. He spent his final years training bomb disposal technicians in techniques that bridged traditional mechanical understanding with modern electronic systems, because he'd learned that the most dangerous weapons often combined old knowledge with new technology, requiring experts who understood both worlds to keep people safe. And sometimes the steadiest hands belong to people who've learned that precision matters most when lives depend on getting every detail exactly right.